Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Miraculous Thinking. I'm your host, Elenique Marie, and with me, my beautiful friend, Crystal Ann Compton. And we're just so happy to be here with you today to talk about our second episode of this incredible little book, Illusions, by the wonderful Richard Bach. And before we jump in, I just want to let you all know what's going on, what's coming up and down the pipeline in the next couple of months. So, next month in May, we are going to be starting Inside the Body of God by Karen Curry Parker. And that will be our book for the month of May. Very excited to talk about that. And then we will be doing The Way of Integrity in the month of June by Martha Beck, followed by a little break in July. We're going to take the month of July off so that you and us can reboot, reset, and come back renewed and refreshed for a brand new season of Miraculous Thinking, in which we will start in the month of August the book suggested by Crystal, What Dreams May Come. So what would be great is if you can buy this book and read it over the summer, you have summer reading, then it would be lovely to just talk to you about what did you think of that book and what came up for you. I know we have a letter that came in to us this week.
Yes.
And boy, don't we love it when we get those letters from
We
you
love
guys.
the letters, yes.
But we do love it. And the goal here is to really create a community. It's really to create a community with you guys where we grow, because there is something to a conscious joining of minds, which is what we're trying to create here. It's really a conscious joining, a conscious exploration into what are we doing here, right? And what are the forces that are at work? What is this life force? What is this prana? What is this energy that is inside of us that wants to express through exploration and creativity and wonder? And we want to wonder with you. So
Yes.
Please feel free to reach out. We love it. We love it. We love it. And I don't know, Crystal. Oh, please, if you haven't already, please join our Facebook group. We are trying to build a little community there of like-minded souls, and we hope to have a lot more interaction with you guys in the group, and also create some nice gifts and experiences for you in the Facebook community. So if you haven't already, join our Facebook group, Miraculous Thinking at Facebook. We also have our email, miraculousthinking@gmail.com.
Yes.
And anything else that they can reach us through?
I mean, we have a YouTube channel. You might be watching us there on YouTube, and you
Yes.
can always leave a comment there. If you comment, we read it. So that's another way to reach out and touch us.
Correct.
Yes.
And touch
Well, energetically touch us. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Crystal, do you want to look at that question before we begin today, or do you want to come back to that question, that comment that we received?
Oh, why don't we start there? This is just someone who wrote in with recommendations for books. And we were talking before we started recording today. And what we're thinking we're going to try starting in August is that 1 month I'll have a book that I want to get into and read. The next month it'll be Elenique, and then the next month it'll be me. And so we're going to kind of switch off. Just prepare for my my books to be weird. I'm just going to tell you, I want to go a little. I'm going to skew weird probably towards the last half of the year. But we're just going to have some fun for sure. But somebody wrote in with some recommendations, so let's read it. This is from Vanessa Bonham. And she says, hi there. At the beginning of your latest episode, you mentioned getting feedback from your listeners of possible books to read. What do you think about these? My curiosity has sparked by Michael Singer, and I'm thinking I want to read The Four Pillars of Zen, which set in motion Mickey's entire practice. And I thought it might be lovely to read it along with you. I've also been wanting to read something by Alan Watts, perhaps The Way of Zen. So that might be a good one to read along with you. Have you read The Way of Zen by Alan Watts?
I haven't.
Me neither. I'd be interested in reading The Four Pillars of Zen, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Vanessa goes on to say, I also have a few suggestions of books that I have read. The first being The Four Sacred Secrets by Prithaji and Krishnaji, especially as an audiobook. It's a phenomenal book, !
Wow.
The authors are husband and wife, and they are amazing. Vanessa also said anything by Sean Achor, Achor, is amazing. I think my favorite of his is Before Happiness.
Mm.
And then she says, if you want to shift gears and learn about how women's sexuality works, then Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski is a must read for everyone. The way she writes is fun and hilarious. Let me know what you think.
I like all of those.
I know.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was an awesome list of
Yeah,
suggestions.
there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, we're going to have to think about that then for September. I think it'd be fun if we picked one of her suggestions for September.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Well,
Let the universe guide
that's your
us.
month. So
Well, I will let the universe guide us through one of those choices because I
okay.
think isn't that what we did when we did the surrender experiment?
Mm-hmm.
That we were like, well, we were going to do a different book.
Right.
And then that didn't work out. And we're
Right.
like, okay, well, let's do this. And so I feel like that email came just in the nick of time.
Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. Okay, so then maybe in September, but you will let us know. You'll give a definitive answer what we're going to be doing in September. Okay.
Definitively.
That sounds fantastic. Oh, and by the way, I always try to include the books that we will be reading and also the months that we're going to be starting them in the description of the podcast and also in the description of the video. So if you're ever wondering, like maybe you want to jump in, grab the book and join us, you can always see where we're going to be in the next few months just to help you out. So yeah. So let's get into illusions. And I just want to wrap. I just want to vibe with you because
I do too.
I mean, here's the thing. We had mentioned last week that this is a masculine book. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of themes around machinery and planes and flying planes and guitars and things like that. Not that guitars are masculine. Banjos and masculine and fields and such.
Yeah.
And, Illinois. There's Illinois. It's not that this is prohibitive. It's not as magical, you know what I mean? It's not as magical as I maybe would want it to be, but that's just my judgmental nature. I think in the second half of the book, like the first half of the book, we have this interplay with Richard and Donald Shimoda. And for those of you who might just be dropping in, Donald Shimoda is the reluctant messiah that this book is based upon. He is a messiah in the world and he's tired of it. He quit. He's here to talk with Richard and maybe impart some wisdom, and then he's going to be peacing out at the end of this book. And I was saying to you before we started the pod, like a lot of these concepts, if you've been in spirituality for a while, if you're metaphysical in nature, like you've heard of these concepts before. There's nothing super revolutionary. The benefit, I think, is in the repetition of the lesson, hearing it again, and from the framework of a fictional work as opposed to a referential book. What do you think? Let's just get your general take about this book. And I'm the one who recommended it via my brother. And I remember my sense of it when you said you read it, you were kind of like, meh. What do you think of the book?
You know, the more I read it, the more I like it. And that's been interesting because when I read it, I just read it in the airplane. And then when we're preparing, I reread it. And then I'm like, that was there? I didn't remember that being there. So like chapter 6, for example, I know that he starts talking about just the fact that he's in this field with a guy and they're exploring the messiahness and, you know, what it means to be that. And I like on page 86, he says, so something's happening to his wrench. Now, Donald, the reluctant messiah, can make the wrench float in space. He flies without needing to refuel. Bugs don't hit his windshield.
He never trained to fly. He just got in the plane and flew it.
Exactly. So this guy suddenly starts to see that the wrench is floating. And he says, what was happening to my wrench? Donald Shimoda was 60 miles at least over some horizon from here. I hefted the thing, examined it, balanced it. There had to be some simple reason because he suddenly sees it floating. And I thought that was really great because it's that way that, again, this idea that they started at the beginning of the book with the idea that we are okay accepting magic in others. But even when we begin to be magical, we try to talk ourselves out of our magic, out of our messiahness. And I loved that reminder. And they do this constantly in the book where he's always second guessing himself, which is what Donald is saying. It's because you put the faith in me that you allow yourself to see the things that I can do is because I believe and you believe in me. But what if you could believe in yourself?
Right.
The way you believe in me. And I think for myself, just being a super type A, like hypercritical person of myself my entire life, where it's never enough. I really resonated with this idea of never being able to really see that magic in yourself, but so easily recognizing it in somebody else. I don't know what you think about that.
No, I think that is so true. And I was listening to somebody actually talk about this book on YouTube and how they were saying the reason there are no superheroes is because none of us actually believe there could be superheroes. Yeah. But the moment somebody believed in a superhero and it manifested, and then we all saw the superhero, then we'd all believe in it and there'd be more superheroes. Yeah. It's really, so it's about what's happening inside of you with regard to your belief. But also, I love how Donald Shimoda is saying, I believe I can do it. So that's the first thing I believe in. So I'm manifesting, and you believe I can do it too. If he didn't believe he could do it and you believed he could he do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could he? So let me say it again. So if Donald didn't believe he could do it, but Richard believed he could do it, could Donald do it?
Well, could he do it in Richard's eyes while still Donald not believing it? And I think we see that a lot. Like all these people that we put on pedestals, right? But actually are very self-loathing. And all the time are wondering, what the hell is anybody seeing in me? I don't see my specialness, but other people project or consent, which is a big word in this book, consent to the specialness of someone who they themselves do not recognize the specialness in themselves and actually spend their whole life wondering why anybody thinks they're special. So I think you can have both. Like you can create a change in someone even though you don't believe in yourself. If the person believes in you, you can affect them. They can give you the power. Like, for example, when you have these people, like I used to work with battered women when I was in college. I was in this group called Wellesley Women Advocates. And, and when you go work with these women, it's not all of them were women that had no resources and no money and nothing, right? Like you have battered women that are highly educated. In fact, they're the ones that are maintaining the household. They're the ones that are doing everything. Yet there's a belief that their well-being and safety can only exist if they continue in this relationship with this abusive man that's not worth a dime. Now, in her reality, that is true. And so if she leaves him, she will just fall apart because the nexus of that belief of what keeps me safe is this man. And without this man, I am nothing. She cannot function. So it becomes real, even though in reality, he's actually not providing more than what she is willing to say that he does for her, which is to keep her safe, which is actually the opposite of what he does. Right. So you see what I'm saying? So I think it can be both ways. I think you can have it both ways, where you can imbue someone with a quality they don't have, and because you imbue them with them, they have it for you, like honesty, like loyalty. How many people don't have husbands or wives that cheat on them, and it's like they completely blank that out, and you ask them, how's your marriage? It's the best husband in the world. Dream guy, and you're like, okay.
So they're literally choosing their illusion. Right.
Exactly. And I think we can all do that. And that's why when your friends try to wake you up from the illusion of a bad choice, you end up turning on your friends. That's why nobody ever tells each other anything. Like if somebody's like cheating or whatever, you're like, I'm not going near that, because this person will find a way to make me the bad guy. So I'll lose my friendship and they'll stay with that partner until they're ready to wake up.
I did that once. I was in my 20s. My very best friend was married, and I came to learn that he was cheating on her. I was like that, picking up the phone and calling her and telling her what I knew and all of the evidence. And my relationship with my very best friend fell apart. It's 30 years later, she's still married to him.
See what I mean?
She's choosing her illusion, and it didn't matter what I said. And also, it's probably not my business to try and change her illusion. I mean, I should just pay attention to the movie that I want to watch and not the movie that I think she should go to.
Yes. And that's actually something that you said is in this book. He says, what he starts asking Donald. Donald asks him, what would a Messiah say? right? Let me try to find which is the chapter that he says that. And he starts saying like how he would respond to a crowd asking him questions because he's a Messiah in training, right? And he keeps asking them, what is it that you would say to them? And he basically at the end ends up with something like, it's none of my business. It's after the scene with the vampire thought form. But I don't know if we're getting ahead of ourselves.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So there's a scene here. I'm trying to see where I have it written down, where he's basically let me see if I can find it. The vampire one. Oh Lord. I'm gonna have to come back to the vampire one. When we get there, we get there. I'll cover it when we get to that chapter. But I found it very interesting, this idea that if all you do is allow other people to just have the illusion that they want to have and just be authentic to the illusion that you want to have, just whatever makes you truly happy. Say yes to the things you really want to say yes to. Say no to the things that you really don't want to do. And just worry about you and stop worrying about what everybody else is doing. That's already deep truth.
Right. And there is a chapter where they do go to see Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And I forget the question that Richard asks that precipitates them going there. But they go to see the movie in answer of Richard's question about the nature of reality. And ultimately, Donald is just showing him that life is like a moving picture. We're sitting in these seats watching this movie. We selected this movie. We came into this movie kind of having a sense of what might happen. We know the title. Maybe we've heard something about this movie. Maybe we know there's going to be some fights, some romance. This is the movie we really want to see. We pay for it. We put ourselves in the presence of that. And then we watch the movie and we immerse ourselves in it with our concentration and our interest. Like we feel like energetically we're a part of what's happening on the screen. And this is an analogy for life. The avatar that I am, Crystal Ann Compton, right, the proxy of my soul, is in this Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid movie, having all of these adventures. And my higher self, my pure consciousness, is watching me doing all of these things. And I selected this movie, this life, with all of the people in it and all of the problems that I'm facing or not, and all the things that I go through for a reason. I paid the ticket. I sat in the seat. I said, turn the projector on. And now here I am. But it's an illusion. I'm immersed in it through my attention. But is it reality? Yeah. Well, Donald Shimoda would say, no, it is not. It's not reality. You're just having fun.
You're just having a good time. Yeah, the question that he asked was, I've never been able to figure out why we're here in the first place. Tell me something about that.
Was there a sense of too much frivolity with some of Donald's answers? Like, we're just here to have fun. We're just cosmic otters playing in the river of the universal life flow, baby. I'm just like, really? Did I just come here to have fun? Is there no deeper meaning to it all?
Well, the part that I like when they do start exploring movies, because they start watching the movie and Richard says, after a while, I got caught up in the story. It was a good movie, right? It was a good movie. And he's watching it. And all of a sudden, Donald's like, Richard. He's like, yeah, why are you here? He's like, it's a good movie, Don. Shh. And Butch and Sundance had blood all over them. And we're talking about why they ought to go to Australia. And then Don's like, why is it good? And he's like, it's fun. Shh, I'll tell you later. And I was irked, right? So he's getting annoyed with the guy. He's like, can you let me watch the movie? Okay. And he says, Richard, why are you here? Look, I'm here because you asked me to come in here. He says, you didn't have to come. You could have said no, thank you. Then he answers, I like the movie, but like in big caps, right? And he says, and then a man in front of him turns around and is like,
shut
annoying,
up.
Right? And then he said, is there anything wrong with that? And then Don answers, nothing at all. And then he says, why the movie? Why did you all of a sudden want to see Sundance? He said, you asked a question. Yes. Do you have an answer? This is my answer. We went to the movie because you asked a question. The movie was the answer to your question. What was my question? He says, your question, Richard, was that even in your brilliant times, you have never been able to figure out why we are here. And then he goes, I remembered. And the movie was my answer? Yes. Oh, he's like, you don't understand. He's like, no. He goes, that was a good movie, but the world's best movie is still an illusion, is it not? The pictures aren't even moving. They only appear to move, changing light that seems to move across a flat screen set up in the dark. The other people anywhere who go to any movie show, why are they there when it's only illusions? Fun. Well, it's entertainment. And he says to him, fun, that's right. Then he goes, could be educational. Good. It's always that, learning, too. And then he says, fantasy. He goes, that's one again. Fun. He's like, tech, and then he's like, learning, two. Escape from boredom. He goes, one. So everything about why you go to a movie is either for fun or to learn something, theoretically. And so he says, basically, that's why we come here. And then at the end, he says, then why would anybody choose a bad lifetime, a horror movie? He said, they not only come to the horror movie for fun, they know it's going to be a horror movie when they walk in, which is a very big statement. And I don't know how I feel about it.
We'll have to talk about it.
He goes, but why? Do you like horror films? And he goes, some people spend a lot of money and time to see horror or soap opera problems that to other people are dull and boring, right? So some people, and then he says, because they think they deserve it for horrifying somebody else. That's another reason why people walk into the movie. So we talked about that karma. And samskaras, right? And the belief that you deserve to be punished. So you will choose to be punished in your next life. Or they like the excitement of horrification. Or that boring is the way they think films have to be. Can you believe that lots of people, for reasons that are very sound to them, enjoy believing that they are helpless in their own films? So he's just posing this idea that, again, like you said, there's so many reasons why you would produce a nightmare, why you produce a horror film, why you produce a film where you think you have no power. And it's endless, right? Why? Because you thought it was fun, because you thought you deserved it, and on and on.
Right. I mean, and it sounds like it comes down to just those two things. It's fun. It's play, the soul's play, and we would say this doesn't feel fun in the life, in the picture, in the movie, but from a soul's perspective, it's fun and or it's educational. I'm learning something. I'm refining my essence and my being. And I think that that's probably what it does come down to. Like all the talk we're talking about, reading the Kabbalion and reading the different books we're reading, it's pretty much an incarnation is educational. Or it's about the experience, this fun, this movement, this creative, this play. I mean, but I think also incarnation to some would be about proximity. At the end of this life, I'm closer to God. I'm making up a distance. And if I do bad, if I'm a bad person, if I'm Hitler, then I go backwards and I'm farther away from God. If I'm a saint, if I'm Mother Teresa, which I mean, controversial, then I'm closer to God. But yeah, that's pretty much why we go to the movies. What do you think about, or go into these lives rather, what do you think about people who select the horror movie, or people select the movies that are disempowering and they say, I'm a victim, but you selected the movie, you paid the price, you sat down in the seat and you watched the projection. Why?
I mean, I think a lot of us are picking that movie even now, even when the story didn't start like a horror film. Like, you might have entered your life with a pretty nice movie, let's say. You're lucky enough to have had a good childhood, a happy childhood. And you notice that there are people that still decide to go down the road of a lot of different self-destructive behaviors. So is that there from before? So is there a karma at work, a belief system that they need, that they don't deserve the happy life that they have, so they will create the suffering that they have? Or some people literally are born into suffering. And why? Well, I can't imagine. I mean, I guess if you love horror movies, if your particular soul likes a horror movie, but it's very hard to identify and relate to that as a human being, understanding what that looks like when your life is a horror film,
right?
From the moment that you enter it. And yet I think also, like, he starts talking about, that do unto others, that I think ties into this when he says, do unto others as you would have them, do whatever you want to be happy, as long as you don't hurt anybody. And Don says, that's BS. He goes, because what if you're doing unto a masochist? Maybe a masochist wants you to beat him up. Maybe that's what would make him happy. So you can't do, and then you withhold hurting them, and that's actually hurting them because they want you to hurt them. So it's this idea that you cannot know what somebody else needs. You cannot know what somebody else wants. What you can know is who you are. And you cannot take responsibility for how that somebody else is going to take your authenticity. You're obviously not trying to hurt anybody, but you have to be yourself. And if for you that's a horror movie, then we need to just let you have your horror movie. And how many people don't fight to save people from the horror movie that they are constantly creating? And you will lose. And it's hard because it's a lot of times it's your loved ones, people that you see self-destructing right before your very eyes. And yet, don't you see that unless the person themselves decides, I've had enough of this horror film, you can't stop it.
Is this where the vampire comes in?
I think it's not a sentence you hear every day.
I know. So they're in the field. It's night. They're gathered around a fire. And I'm not sure if this is in the conversation about the golden rule, but there enters into kind of the circle a man, and he sits down, and he's a vampire. He's wearing a cloak, and
I love it.
Basically says, I have a need, and that need is I need to suck your blood. And Richard's like, you can't suck my blood, and he's like, but I need that, right? And so what did you take out of this particular scene?
I loved it. I loved this scene, and I love this idea of a thought form and how he used that vampire, which terrified Richard. So Richard pretty much jumps up, threatens to kill the vampire. And then the vampire, when he realizes it, like actually smiles and then just disappears. Slowly disappears, right?
He was never real.
He was never real. And I think that that's a really great way to put it. It's just this way of imagining this idea that what someone needs, and how many of us, and he said, that's what we do to each other. That's how we punish each other. This is what we do to anyone when we tell them we'll be hurt if they don't live our way.
Is he saying we're sucking their blood, we're sucking their life force, we're
basically saying to somebody, either give me your life force, give me everything that is you, whether you like it or not, or you're hurting me. And that's what we're doing to each other in this world right now.
Yes.
There is such a lack of like respect for people to just have a difference of opinion.
Watch their own movie.
It's the opposite, right? It's the people pretend like right now everybody's actually very respectful of each other's opinions, and we have a lot of labels.
Politically correct, yeah.
A lot of words, a lot of labels, a lot of behaviors, a lot of cancel culture. You said that, you can't say this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, to a degree, that's been very valuable in rehabilitating a history of indifference and racism toxicity. And everything, toxicity. But now we've gone too far.
We're toxic.
Nobody can say anything. Nobody can have an opinion. Their opinion cannot be respected. Look, if there's a crazy person that has a crazy opinion, they're entitled to their opinion. I'm sure they think I'm crazy. Don't listen to my show. Don't become friends with me. That's what we used to do.
Right.
I don't like you. Okay, let's not be friends.
I'm not going to consume your content, your energy and information. I'll stay over here. You stay over there. And that's fine. Or we talk. We have a conversation where you have space and are allowed your sovereignty and your opinion and your belief. I have mine. Maybe we can build a bridge. Maybe we can't, but we talk about it and we don't condemn the other person for having the opinion. I mean, if you're a deeply terrible person, you have to decide whether you're willing to expend your own life force to try and persuade a deeply disturbed and toxic person. But like, we don't even have conversations anymore. Like, I just think about Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, meeting in the salons of old, and Tolkien was a Catholic, C.S. Lewis was a Christian, and just swapping concepts, talking about beliefs, talking about their writing, talking about their philosophies, disagreeing, getting into arguments, but that was okay because everybody was allowed to be where they were. Nowadays, though, but this is not sustainable. This is we're in an insane asylum, self-imposed. And most of us are agreeing to go along with it because we are afraid of what happens if we stand in our authenticity and our truth. Again, not sustainable. The dam is going to break when it does. God help us.
I don't know what's going to happen when that happens because I'm worried about it.
Yeah.
Because, and again, our little traumatizing book, The Kabbalion, it really helped us, our little trauma.
Yeah.
This idea of the pendulum.
Yes.
It is the only thing you know for sure is that it always goes up, and what goes up must come down. And it all goes.
It's
and then
always
I'm
swinging.
terrified of the opposite extreme that we're going to come back to after we come back from this hellish ride into extreme zone, wherever we are, and then back to another kind of extreme zone.
Right.
And it's just disappointing. But I think that this idea that that's what we do to people, because we think people are here to fulfill us.
Give me your blood.
Yeah. And that's what passes for marriage and friendship and parenting. An exchange of blood.
Yeah.
And the better, nicer partner is the one that takes less blood, but takes blood nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so I think if we can't be honest with ourselves because if you can't know what you need and be willing to be brave enough to give it to yourself unapologetically, then you're going to try to use screens and other people as shields to hide behind, to get what you want. You know, those people that are like, oh, we can't come to dinner because my husband has a bad belly. You know, like they won't just say, look, I don't want to go to your house, or I'm busy, or I'd rather go to a concert. Like, how many times don't we do that in our lives? How many times don't we hide the truth, because we're afraid of hurting people's feelings?
Right.
And you don't need to say the truth in a hurtful way. You don't. You can just be authentically loving and say, I'm sorry, that day I want to do that. Or, you know what? I really don't feel like being in a big group of people right now, or whatever it is.
Well, there was another part of this book that I thought was interesting. They both go to a cafe. And again, this whole book is just conversations between Donald and Richard, and Donald trying to teach Richard the truth about life, which is it's an illusion, and he has the choice to make it fun and do what he wants. And we can all do whatever we want. Doesn't mean there won't be consequences to it, but we can always do whatever we want, which seems to me to be the ultimate point. I don't know about you, but anyway, back to the cafe where they're having burgers. Donald starts talking about magnetism, which I thought was interesting, and I wanted to suss out with you. Donald says, well, Richard, we're magnets, aren't we? Not magnets, we're iron wrapped in copper wire. And whenever we want to magnetize ourselves, we can. Pour our inner voltage through the wire. We can attract whatever we want to attract. A magnet is not anxious about how it works. It is itself. And by its nature, it draws some things and leaves others untouched. I ate a potato chip and frowned at him. You left out one thing. How do I do it? Donald says, you don't do anything. Cosmic law, remember, like attracts like. Just be who you are, calm and clear and bright. Automatically, as we shine who we are, asking ourselves every minute, is this what I really want to do? Doing it only when we answer yes, automatically that turns away those who have nothing to learn from who we are and attracts those who do, and from whom we have to learn as well. And then Richard said, but that takes a lot of faith. And meanwhile, you get pretty lonely. Donald says, humbug on faith. It takes zero faith. What it takes is imagination. What is your thought about this?
In that section, he goes on to say that the word faith was utilized 2,000 years ago because that's the best word they could find, because people didn't talk about imagination.
Right.
But now we have a new word for what faith is, and faith is imagination. So he almost basically says faith is imagination.
Yes.
And I love that, because that's exactly what it is. We are believing in something we can't see, can't prove, can't talk to, whatever it may be. And it doesn't have to be faith in God. It could be faith in yourself. It could be faith in a politician. Like you see this politician and you're like, oh, I'm going to vote for you because I have faith you're going to make it better. Based on what?
Right.
That you can imagine a world where what that guy is saying is going to be better, or that woman, you know? So I thought it was very powerful, this idea that imagination and faith are interchangeable, much like we discussed consciousness and energy are one.
Yes, and then there's the scripture that we referenced, I think, last week, which is in Hebrews, I think, 11. I could be totally wrong, but faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen.
Yeah.
That's such a miraculous little scripture. It's the evidence of what you don't have right now, but you can only have it in your mind, and it's imagination.
It is
that is the only way to do it. I love that faith is distilled down to imagination. So there comes a point where they're talking about magnetizing things and manifesting things. Donald challenges him to manifest something small, not starting off with something he really, really wants. And for Richard, that's a woman, I guess, but something small that's a little more manageable. And so,
how creative.
I know. Give me a woman. He chooses a blue feather. Donald looked at him blankly and said, Richard, a blue feather? Richard says, well, you said anything, not a lady, something little. Donald shrugged. Fine, a blue feather. Imagine the feather. Visualize it. Every line and edge of it, the tip, V-splits where it's torn, fluff around the quill, just for a minute, then let it go. Richard says, I closed my eyes for a minute and saw an image in my mind, 5 inches long, iridescent blue to silver at the edges, a bright clear feather floating there in the dark. And then, Donald says, surround it in golden light if you want. That's a healing thing to make it real, to help make it real, but it works in magnetizing too, which I thought was really interesting, to add the golden light around it, that you're manifesting it for the healing. And then at the end, he says something like, because he manifests the feather, right? But he manifests it as an image on the back of a milk carton for Blue Feather Farms or something. And Richard's so excited. And he's like, look, I manifested the feather. And Donald's like, I thought you wanted an actual feather. And he's like, well, I mean, this is pretty close. And this is where Donald says, oh, you should have imagined yourself with the feather in order to be able to hold the feather. I left that part out. I forgot to tell you that. So what do you think about this in terms of the mechanics of manifestation?
I think it's in alignment with everything that we've studied, that that's when they tell you, like when you're making, I think it's Joe Dispenza, he says, when you're making those mind movies that you have to create and like play for yourself and play for yourself, you're not supposed to be seeing yourself over there. Like you're not supposed to imagine Crystal out there, but you're supposed to be looking out the eyes of Crystal that is already having everything. So you have to like look down at Crystal's hand and see the blue feather in your hand. And that is when you're saying, I want the experience of the blue feather, not just blue feathers, you know?
Oh, so that's interesting. I've never heard him or anybody say that, as opposed to seeing yourself, an image in the play or in the motion picture. You have to see
because that's how you're going to feel it.
Yes,
because as soon as I imagine it out my eyes, it's like if I imagine myself touching a stove, I can almost feel that heat. So now I'm bringing a sensory experience. I'm already utilizing that sense of eyes to bring it. If I want, let's say the same way I want feather, I want a stack of cash, I can imagine that like in my hands. Oh, that's how a whole bunch of 20s or hundreds feels like, right? And you're imagining this. And now there's this kinesthetic experience, which is telling the subconscious it already happened. You're not remembering it. You're not seeing it as a movie. You're remembering it as a memory. And that's very important.
And is that what triggers the subconscious to create it? Because if the subconscious thinks you've already had it, why would it create it again?
Well, because it felt great. Because usually these mind movies you're making, you're supposed to make the volume and the feeling of having it, the feeling of happiness. And
tones of reality, right?
Yeah, you're putting yourself into some sort of like LSD trip about, naturally produced endorphins in your own mind and serotonin or whatever. So you're creating this sense for yourself of joy, of peace, of abundance, whatever it may be. And that's why the imagination is so important, because most people, when you ask them to do that, and I can count myself in that, especially at the beginning, it's like, okay, I imagined that for 2 minutes. Okay, but okay. Like you would think that you would enjoy imagining yourself living your dream house or writing your amazing book or visiting whatever country. But it's like after you think about it for like 10 minutes or whatever it is, like you're like, okay, all right, I don't want to think about that anymore. Well, if you can't be bothered to feel the feeling of the thing that you say that you want, maybe you don't want it. Maybe you think you want it. Think you want to have it because it's the thing you're supposed to want. Because the thing that you really want is easy to think about and dream about and love the feeling of imagining that it's there in your hands. And so I think that that's where a lot of subconscious programming, we think we have to want things that we don't want. We've been indoctrinated. Like some people think, I need to have kids. I need to have kids. That's my dream. I want to have a baby. I need to be a mom. And in reality, they don't. And so they find that they can't get pregnant, and there's nothing wrong with them. They keep going to the doctor, and doctor keeps checking, and no, you have eggs and everything's fine, but you're not getting pregnant. There's something in there that's like, actually, I don't. And
Right.
so how many times don't we will ourselves to produce what outside we've been told is valuable? Oh, when you have that beautiful house, then you made it, or when you have 10 books and 5 have to be bestsellers, then you made it,
Right.
and you don't want it. So you think you don't have power to manifest, but it's because actually you're sabotaging the manifestation that you are telling yourself that you want, because what you want is not really that.
Right. Because I don't think your body is ever going to lie. Your body doesn't lie.
Exactly.
It's a true psychic instrument. If you have an existing sub signal
Mm-hmm.
where you say, I want to manifest children, but your sub signal says, but I don't know if I'll be a good parent. I was abused as a child. I'll probably F it up. You have a
Mm-hmm.
sub signal, whether you're conscious or not conscious to it. Maybe it exists in your subconscious. If it is strong enough of a belief of self, it is going to counterbalance whatever you're trying to force into your reality. You might manifest it temporarily. You might manifest it, but never enjoy it.
No.
Or never have peace with it. And as a sidebar, I was interviewing somebody recently about the law of attraction, because Esther Hicks says, or Abraham says, all you have to do is to focus in a manifestation way, meaning focus with your visualization, with your feeling, hold the high frequency of that which you want to manifest for 16 seconds, like pure, focused attention. If you can hold it for 16 seconds, you've created it. It's starting as a thought form, but it's being put out into the universe, and it will be drawn back to you. And
Wow.
she says, because like the Schumann resonance is picking
Mm-hmm.
up and time is picking up, and everything is going faster now, that it's actually 14 seconds, whereas I don't know, 7 years ago it was 16, now it's 14 seconds. And
So that's all it takes.
if you can't even manage 14 seconds of pure unadulterated concentration and joy, feeling the vibration of already being that, then you probably have a subsignal that's getting in the way of that. And maybe you need to meditate and figure out what that
But
is,
that's what
or
we talked about.
go to see Elenique.
Also.
Yes.
But we talked about that, I think, a couple of weeks ago, where we said, your life, how do we work on our triggers, and how do we work on our limiting beliefs? It's what's showing up in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't even have to see me for that. Like, just to just be like,
It's happening.
do I have a belief system around relationships? Well, if all your relationships are troubled, you have a belief system about relationships that's not serving you. If you have a problem with
Right.
food, you have a belief system about food. Bottom line, you don't have to go too far. But in page 90, they start talking about how you learn. And he says, some of us start learning these things subconsciously. When he makes
Yeah, the wrench
the wrench
float.
float in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
he says, some of us start learning these things subconsciously. Our waking mind won't accept it. So we do our miracles in our sleep.
Yeah.
I love that. I was
Yeah.
like, yes. Okay. And then he says, don't be impatient. We're all on our way to learning more. It will come to you a little faster now, and you will be a wise old spiritual maestro before you know it. And then he's like, and he goes, what do you mean before I know it? I don't want to know it. I don't want to know anything.
Argue for your limitations and you will have them.
And that's exactly what you find later in the chapter. And I love that thing. I said, wow, this is what I'm talking about, the subconscious, right? So, and that's why all these books that we read them on 2 levels: the level that the conscious mind can process, including this one, and the subconscious wisdom activation that you feel when you read a book like The Kabbalion or Neville Goddard, where there's this level that you're reading it and you can almost feel something's happening.
Yes.
You don't know what it is, but when you start interacting in life, something's different. And it's that information is being recognized by that super consciousness.
Yes.
And taking effect. But it takes a while for your conscious mind to accept it, or at least stop blocking it.
Yes. And that is so true. When I was doing programs, before we'd start like a 12-week program, I would say, I mean, it's fun and good to like lean in and understand the content and like really get into it, drill down, like get into the concepts, but you don't really have to do that. It's actually better to kind of lean back in a passive way and listen to the teaching and allow the energy, because it's being carried on sound. Sound is energy. You're an energy being. You are receiving it, whether you thinkingly understand it or not. The being of who it is that you are is receiving it, and by the way, already has it. It's just awakening and a remembrance inside of you once it's received it. But yeah, I mean, that's the better way to learn, is to not be efforting so much to try and understand. And this is what Richard is doing throughout this whole book. I don't get it. I want to understand. Frustrating Donald Shimoda a little bit, because he just can't relax into the flow state of what he's trying to tell him.
And I really could identify so much with Richard in this book, and this grasping and almost desperate, like, urgency and feeling like I have to figure it out. I have to figure it out. I have to know. And I felt like that my whole life. I have to know. I have to figure it out. I have to use my head. And there's a certain point now, especially, and I guess that's, that's why you thank any kind of illness that you ever have, that's the gift of it. Like, when I don't feel well, and I've had to change so many things because of how I was feeling, I didn't have the energy to approach my life anymore like that. Just don't. So there's been a lot more allowing things to wash over and taking things in small kernels. And actually, I feel like I've learned so much more.
I was going to say, right?
In this period of time than I did in all of that efforting and all of that pushing,
studying and taking notes, and
highlighting. I don't even take notes anymore. I have like a notepad. I literally have like 4 words on it. You know what I mean?
Like keywords and things like that. Yep.
I used to highlight, and then I would reread everything I highlighted and rewrite it, retype it, condense it, reanalyze it. Like, it took hours to study something, because I always felt like I'm missing something. I don't know it enough. And I was so busy trying to understand it that I wasn't trying to experience anything.
I mean, that's real knowledge, gnosis, the experience of knowledge. Without words, without a book, without even a teacher, you can have such a profound experience of God, of knowledge, of energy, that is a communication unto itself, that your brain isn't necessarily processing, but it's happening and it's integrating. And those little kernels, they're unfolding. I remember Trisha Carr telling the story of her reading The Power of Now and being like, I don't get it. This book, like, it's dense. There's a lot going on here. But she read it, she stayed with it. And then some 10 years later, there's an activation in her life. She's like, oh my gosh, the power of now. It's finally unfolding. It's finally being revealed to my consciousness. It was integrated 10 years ago, but now I'm understanding it from a conscious space. I'm like, yeah, that's often how it works.
Can I tell you, as you know, I'm doing that yoga program in the Himalayan Institute, and it's just been incredible. But one of the things that we've been learning is breath training, and just doing very simple poses and just breathing in those poses. But the way they have explained what breath is, what prana is, and how to follow it and how to allow it. I have been doing meditation since I was 14 years old. I've been doing yoga since that long. And I have never had the experience of awareness of a livingness or life in my breath as I have had in 1 week of these people just reframing it and explaining it and breaking it down into such small pieces of experience, not theory, not that, and telling us, forget the posture, forget it. The posture follows breath. How many of us aren't taught the opposite? It's, oh wait, are my hands straight enough? Am I twisting as much as a pretzel? Like, do I look good? Does the posture look good? It's not about the posture. It's about the breath. And the breath and your ease in your breathing as you progress in your practice allows the postures to become right? But the posture doesn't drive the breath. The breath and the prana and your relationship to the prana is the most important thing. I've been going to yoga classes for 30 years. No one said that. No one said, hey, Elenique, forget it. If your knees are bent, it's fine. Focus on the breath.
Are you sure? What if they did, but you just weren't ready for it?
Well, maybe I didn't. Thanks.
No,
Are you saying I'm a bad listener?
No, I'm just like, but sometimes it's always available. It's just whether we're like finally in the place to receive it. Such a good point to make about like the right person, the right delivery, the right carrier at the right time. It makes all the difference in the world. And I think for teachers who focus on the experience, that's the best and most juicy way to teach. And you can trust yourself to receive it. Like you're saying, you're taking notes, you're hard, you're trying, you're studying. I want to get there, but like you're already there though. You already have the innate ability to breathe. You already have the magic inside of you.
The more I learn, the more I know that what I needed to know was actually not really in any book that I ever read. Like they've been really fun.
Yeah.
And I guess that goes to the movie.
Fun.
The making it hard
or education,
because it's
right?
fun. Like, ooh, I'm gonna, it's like, what is that? Sherlock Holmes, right? I'm Sherlock Holmes in the life of Elenique, and she's going to find the reason for why we're on Earth and how to realize self-realization. That's the movie. And I've been on the movie and I'm like, I'm going to read this book and that book and take this course and the other course. And eventually she realizes, the crescendo of the movie, the answer was always inside herself. Like, how much does that sound like a Hollywood movie?
Well, The Wizard of Oz, yes, indeed.
Right?
Yes.
just it's always in you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that's a nice feeling because the truth is usually quite simple, even though it's not easy.
Correct.
And I think that's something that we forget is just because something's simple doesn't mean it's easy to do.
And it often requires us getting out of our own way, really setting aside or setting to the side your thinking part that needs to understand so much. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you just need to feel and be in the presence of it.
And allow the mind to follow that.
Yes.
That feeling and that intelligence that comes in when you're actually able to just be with yourself, your essence. Then allow the mind, because right now the mind is playing master and the energy is supposed to follow like a 2-year-old tantrumy nut job. That's pretty much how most of us are going through life, right? Emotion here. I want chocolate. No, I'm sleepy. Let me play with the bear. I want to go in the car, right? Like that's how we're going through life. And that's what's supposedly driving the energy. Whereas the mind was supposed to be a vehicle, a tool for the energy. But something went upside down and we're still trying to figure out how to set it right side up.
Yes, indeed. We all need a reluctant Messiah to point the way. So towards
where are you, Don?
Where are you, Donald? Well, as it turns out, and we kind of get the sense, don't we, Elenique, through this book, like Donald's like ready to go. He's been here. He had to quit his job as a Messiah because people are bad and people are always going to be clamoring for miracles, but not the understanding. It feels like he's here to impart his wisdom to Richard, but also to awaken in Richard what Richard already knows. And of course, there's also the reference to them having lived in many lives before. And I think Donald at some point says, maybe in this life, you're going to finally get it, ding dong. I think you're close. You're almost there. But Donald wants to go. And so they go all of a sudden to a radio program. There was no setup for that. I don't know how that was. Okay. They go to a radio program and the interviewer is talking with Donald, and Donald is coming off kind of selfish. I can do whatever I want. This is my life. You don't have to understand me, like answering questions in a kind of a selfish way. And Richard is immediately getting the intuition, like, why is he doing this? Why isn't he being compassionate in his answers? People start to call in and say, well, not everybody can just get what they want. Some of us have to work by the sweat of our brow. Some of us have kids out here. And he's like, well, that's your choice. I can do what I want. I mean, he does seem pretty callous in the way he's answering these questions, and Richard gets the sense that he's doing it on purpose. And finally, somebody calls and challenges Donald, and Donald is staying on this selfish kind of line. And the guy says, well, if I can do whatever I want, then I can come down to where you are and I can just get my shotgun and shoot you and kill you. And Donald's like, yeah, you can absolutely do that. You can do whatever you want. Setting up the next scene where I guess this person comes and shoots Donald. There was an interesting part where Donald refers to the caller, like he kind of smiles when the caller calls in, like he's a friend, a soul friend. He recognizes him on a soul level. And even after this happens, he gets shot, and then there's a dream that Richard has with Donald. Or maybe he says it when he's dying, something like, I would rather die by a friend than by a hater, right? What was your whole experience of this part?
Well, first I thought how angry, what I thought was interesting was how he pointed out how angry people get when you're just willing to be unapologetically yourself.
Yeah.
How much that pisses people off.
Yeah.
Because you're not conforming to the beehive, you're not doing your role. And the guy said, well, what about if all parents, and if I quit working, and if I did this, and you're like, you can. And it just destabilizes people, and that puts them into such a panic that they feel that they will go to the extreme of having to murder somebody just to get everything back to status quo. And we've seen that to be a theme in history. Anytime somebody comes and says anything that's a little bit Martin Luther King, Jesus, it's like, it's just a theme with people that it freaks them out so much they want to kill you. So I thought that was well done, how they did that. Also, I remembered the part where he says that, we're all actors, and the doesn't care if you're playing a good guy or a bad guy. So clearly the shooter in this case was just another actor that needed to play the role of the bad guy.
Right.
Quote unquote. And he's playing the role of the Messiah. Because even that's a lie. Right?
When he even says, like, I realize the doesn't need me to tell everybody else about the is. The is. Right. The doesn't need me to come here and teach people and, point to the glory of God or the glory of the is. The is already. And so he understands his own folly a little bit in the way he's been approaching it, his work as a Messiah.
And I know that Richard at the end says, but why did you have to pick this way to go? Like, why? And he goes, well, I like a dramatic.
I like drama.
Ending. I like drama. So I needed to, have this terrible, tragic, explosive ending. And if you look at any of your life with a little bit of humor, you'll notice that we are such drama queens about the things that happen. Even the really bad things, you can put in a lot of different ways. You can reframe those experiences. Do you want to? No. Why? Because it feels so good to be a victim. I mean, it feels great. You're justified in your bad behavior. You're justified in your defense mechanisms. You're justified and you're not responsible for the bad, crazy things that you do because that one time that thing happened. So there's no accountability. So it's a great thing to be a victim. And I'm not saying that bad things don't happen.
Sure.
They do.
Of course. Yeah.
But we can choose.
We feed into it often.
And then milk it way longer than is useful.
I mean, we expand the karmic season. We built it into our blueprint to have this sort of suffering event so that we could learn on a soul level. But then because we love the attention that we get when we have a victim moment or experience, we extend it. But, to be a victim requires other people acknowledging you being a victim, so that they look at you, pay attention to you, take care of you, bring you your water, give you your food, take you your places. I mean, it requires like a whole cast of characters orbiting around you so that you can continue to be a victim. What happens though when those people just say, I'm not going to buy into your victimhood? If that's the state you want to be in, because people persist in their victimhood after all the people have been driven away. Why?
Oh yeah. And then that's another further reason to be a victim. All these bad things happened to me and now everybody abandoned me.
They left me.
And it's nothing that I did. I did nothing. Things, people are so hateful. I think all of us have had negative, we've benefited from negative behaviors to meet unmet needs for care, love, companionship, whatever it may be, driven by deep fear of loneliness or exclusion or whatever. And it takes a lot of willpower to stand up and recognize it and say, I don't want to do that. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
I think it takes so much willpower to recognize, man, I'm bleeding these people dry, like the vampire. Yeah, they can't be somebody else. They can't be who they're supposed to be if they have to keep babysitting you.
Right.
and your story and your drama and your brokenness.
Look, it's weird to me. I feel like most people are that way. I feel
Yeah.
it is the outlier who becomes conscious to their own bad behavior and does something about it, or seeks to develop themselves personally or spiritually to become a better person on the planet. Like
I think that's why you
most
have the
people,
messiahs are rare. That's why
yeah,
they're rare. Messiahs got, let's not even talk about messiahs, but like people that take personal accountability requires awareness. It means that you can't be on automatic anymore. And
yeah.
once you become aware, you have to decide you want to take ownership for the mess that you're in.
Everything is just you pushed out. So if
That's
you want
right.
to, if you take that philosophy and believe it, then you have to take radical responsibility for the role that you play in your own life, good, bad, or indifferent, and also the collective.
Yeah.
You're part of this collective. If everything is just you pushed out, I mean, you're the entire collective is you. How's that working for you? How's that working for us? The idea of taking radical responsibility is to look inside of yourself, look at the disturbances in the world, find the correlate within you, and then bring that into the light, bring that into the alignment to heal
Exactly.
it. But people, that's too much. That's hard. That's hard work. It's easier if I've got orbiters bringing me my Taco Bell.
Mm-hmm. Like I love that show, all these shows about the 600-pound life and the other thing and the,
Girl,
whatever. And I'm like,
I love
I
that
don't
show.
understand how. Yeah, right. And as I'm like, here we go again.
I can't
And
take
the
it. I love
doctor's
it.
like, you need to leave. You need to go lose 45 pounds, which is totally
In
doable
1 month.
in 1 month. Come back.
He
He's the
gives him
best.
the book, like it's got
I want a
pictures.
picture of him on a t-shirt of
He's
the
in
doctor.
Houston. So,
I
I mean,
know.
if you come
Can
to
we become
Texas,
friends with him?
I drove by it with Jeremy. I went by his Dr. Nozardin
Didn't.
strip mall clinic. Oh, yeah, I did.
I want to see Dr. Nazard and Dr. Now,
Dr. Now. But I mean, he
right?
gives them everything they need to succeed, and yet they come back on their bullshit every single time.
And they're like, I get so mad because I work so hard and I don't understand how I gained 32 pounds. And you're like, mm-hmm. And he's
Mhm.
like, did you follow the diet? Most of the time,
Right.
except when I wasn't.
Right.
And then this happened.
I
32 pounds.
know.
And that's not to minimize because I
Of course
really
not.
believe that the people that are having such a degree of a weight gain that they're morbidly obese, I don't know why he doesn't start them immediately on a therapy regime. Like there is a driver there.
Oh,
It's
of
meeting
course.
an emotional need. And it's
Yes.
not just discipline. There's usually, as you've seen, a lot of suffering, a lot of abuse, a lot of terrible things that have happened to the people, and they're coping with it through building a flesh wall of protection.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I never know why he doesn't just from the minute they walk in there, I'm like,
Right.
okay, here's the diet and here's a therapist.
Or require them before they even get there to be doing
Mm-hmm.
90 days of therapy.
Yeah, that would make
Something.
it so much more useful. You
Yes.
get clear the clutter and then start with the physical. But you got to start with the mental before you go to the physical.
Well, but then I look at myself eating my Taco Bell, watching my 600-pound life, watching the movie.
Yeah.
I'm observing the movie. All of us do. And then we think, oh my God, I'm so much better than that one.
No.
I'm so much better than. I mean, I think that's why people do it because I'm not as bad as that. I'm bad. I got
But not as
problems,
bad as that.
but I'm not as bad as
Problems.
that.
You got them too, right?
Yeah,
So it's like
that's
we're okay.
right.
Now, you know
Right.
what? I always tell my husband, like with so with our son, like with discipline, and he's like, "You got to be more disciplined with this, that, and the other, and whatever." I'm like, "Where are your house keys?
See,
Where are your glasses? Where's this? Where's that?" Like, I always try to remind myself, and I'm always, I mean, for me, food is always, it's always a thing, right? Because I'm always thinking about what should I eat, what shouldn't I eat, and blah, blah, blah. It's not easy.
Mm-mm.
Even when and so what we're talking about is degrees of dysfunction. Just because people can't see overweightness doesn't mean you don't have a problem with food. You might just be better at controlling your problem with food, which is a problem too.
Right.
See what I mean? So it's like we play the game of what's out here is
Mm.
the thing, but all of us in here are playing some kind of crazy game,
Yes.
some dysfunctional something in some area. I don't care who you are. I don't care if
Yes.
you're David Beckham.
100%.
You got problems. Everybody does.
Yes.
But I love you, David Beckham. No offense.
You're awful handsome.
I can't stand it.
No, he's selfish. Very handsome.
I know.
So Donald dies, and Richard's Richard's a little shocked because as Donald is dying, Richard's like, okay, heal yourself. I mean, like, just come out of this delusion. Let's get into a new one. And Donald chooses to let go and chooses to die. But then he comes to him in a dream. What did you think about the dream?
It ties it up, and he's like, we're going to see each other again.
I'm still alive in this dimension.
Here. This is exactly what I wanted. And basically, he's like the Luke Skywalker of Richard's life. Whenever you really need me, I shall appear. It's kind of that feeling that you get that he's going to be like a Yoda coming in. It was a nice ending.
And he's there to encourage Richard to write it down.
Exactly.
To write a book.
Which is how we get the first chapter of the book.
And Richard's like, I don't want to write a book. I have no desire to write a book. But he convinces him to. And that's how.
And that's the book.
We come into this book. And there was one little parable in the Messiah's Handbook that I thought was pretty interesting. And I wanted to share it with you and everybody else. It was from chapter 13. And it reads, your conscience is the measure of the honesty of your selfishness. Listen to it carefully.
I wrote explain ?
I know. I wanted you to help me to understand this.
I couldn't. I said, I'm going to write it down for Chris. Look, explain ? Like, I don't know what this means.
Well, what is your conscience? Is that your barometer for good and bad, right and wrong?
Yeah.
So if your conscience is your right or wrong barometer, it is the measure of your honesty of your own selfishness.
But that's what I found weird. It's not the measure of yourself. Your conscience is the measure of your selfishness. That would have made sense. Your conscience is the measure of your selfishness. How selfish are you or not? But he says it's the measure of the honesty of your selfishness. So it's really measuring how honest are you about your selfishness.
Right. Your delusion of your selfish, of your not being selfish.
And that makes it harder to comprehend.
It does.
Yeah.
That's one I'm going to have to meditate upon.
Me too. Or we'll write him a letter. Hey, Richard Bach. What did you mean?
Would you like to come on the pod and let us know?
Yeah, we invite you, Richard. Please come tell us.
So overall, I felt like I'm glad I read that book.
Me too.
I think that there were a lot of metaphysical, spiritual principles that I believe in that were illustrated in a new way. I appreciate that. I'm ready for a new book, though. How do you feel?
I loved it. Crystal, the more I read it, the more I was like,
this
is deep. This is deep. Like so many little gems, just like even that, just the idea of thought forms, how we attach to thought forms, how he said, when they're trying to make that cloud disappear and he can't do it. And then he picks a tiny cloud and then he's like focusing on the cloud. And then eventually the cloud disappears. And Donald's like, wow, I'm amazed that happened considering how attached you were to it not happening.
Right.
And he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, you were so convinced that it had to be hard. Your belief was so convinced that I'm amazed it cooperated with disappearing at all. Because you were more attached to the idea that it would remain than it would disappear. And I thought, man, how many things don't we do that in our lives? And we're so focused on holding this negative expectation that it's a miracle that any of our problems ever go away with how much we like to focus on them remaining forever.
Right.
So
or believing that they will. Yep.
Yeah. So I found the book really full of these little gems. I kind of wrote them down and made like a little sheet. And I just put it like above my desk and just going to try to do the Messiah Handbook thing, like go down and be like, which one today, and see.
That's
awesome.
What he
said, right?
Yeah.
It can speak to you no matter. We discussed that last week. Any book can do that for you.
Yes.
So
but that's great. So you're going to print them out. You're going to put them up and you're just going to do your...
You know what I'll do? I'll put that in the Facebook group.
I would love that. I was going to say, can you make a PDF so we can all do it?
I'll make a PDF. I'll make it cute.
Oh, we could print it out. Awesome.
I'm going to try to put it in a wheel. Because it's much easier to know when you go vertically with something.
Yes.
But like maybe we can just like spin it and put your finger down and see which of the quotes you get.
Oh my gosh, that's a great idea.
I'll put it in a wheel.
Thank you. We would love that. Well, any final thoughts as we move on from illusions into Inside the Body of God? I do want to talk about Inside the Body of God a little bit, but any final thoughts?
No. I think we've covered this.
We're done with that book. Thank you, Richard Bach. Okay, so Inside the Body of God. So for people, I know you've read this. I have not read this yet. I mean, I've read a little bit, but I haven't read the whole thing. This, again, has to do with human design. Can you kind of give us a little, Elenique summary of what we're about to get into with this book?
This book is human design, but it's much more than human design. It's really talking about the ways that we can know ourselves and our own awareness as a quantum being, as an energy being, and how the entire universe is the body of God, and we are contained within the body of God, and therefore all of the intelligence and all of the knowledge and all of the knowing of God is ours to access. And we do that through vibration. And so she puts together like all these different steps of how do we do that? How do we turn our vibration up? How do we change our thinking? So it's a very implementable book. That's why I love it, because it really is, you can act on it. It's not just let's read it and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go through some
exercises,
almost like how with the Yoga Sutras, there's like a sutra. So it's kind of that feeling where we're going through this thing, and can you ponder on this and can you practice this until you change that?
Is human design involved at all?
It is. It's mentioned, but it's actually written also very much. So she weaves in the Gospel according to Luke, which is
the Gospel of Thomas too.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Gospel of Thomas, not Luke. The Gospel of Thomas. So I was. That's why we picked it, because that's when we were going to do our Gospel of Thomas book, or we were going to explore it. And I told you this is a cool way. So every single chapter, she put something in from the Gospel of Thomas, and you can see how that idea weaves itself out in the actual chapter itself. So it's a beautiful book on many levels. Yeah.
I'm excited. There's still time to pick it up. We start this next week. We're going to read this throughout the month of May, and we want you guys to join us. If you have any thoughts or commentary on Illusions by Richard Bach, go ahead and send us an email to miraculousthinking@gmail.com. Also, if you have some books to recommend and or just some thoughts you want to share, just want to reach out to us, let us know what those thoughts are. We would love to hear from you very, very much.
Very much.
I guess and there's nothing else that we want to talk about. Are we getting out of here now? Did we go kind of all over the? Did we get over?
We always do, don't we?
we
go where spirit leads. So here we are.
So that's. I mean, if you don't know that yet, then
I don't know. Probably the wrong podcast,
right? Absolutely. Well, this was a lot of fun. And until next time, everybody. Next week, everybody, stay safe, stay warm, stay blessed. Bye, guys.
Bye.